Since we're here and we're on microphones,
We are.
man, I know we're not a news outlet, but I started writing a couple things about the Black and White acquisition,
Oh yeah.
and I thought maybe it would be interesting to just kind of kick that around.
Yeah.
Or maybe you can help me articulate what I was thinking so I can write about it more clearly.
Yeah. I'm down.
So there was big news in the specialty coffee world.
Dun dun dun.
As big of news could be for small news, you know what I mean?
Was that big news in the coffee world after tariffs? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. I
was
mean, I
big
think in a certain section of the coffee world, because you've
People are
got
making it a big deal, so that counts for something.
well, that's the only thing that makes something a big deal is if people make it a big deal, right?
Totally.
If nobody cares, then nobody cares. But if somebody cares, I think this is maybe part of what I'm trying to digest. So you have a company, Black and White, and again, I got no affiliation with them. I know both the people who started it through specialty coffee. You know, Lem and Kyle. I've known them for a long time. But I mean, they were a beloved specialty coffee roaster. That's undeniable.
But so is Passenger and Spy House. That's why I'm like, yeah, totally. So
But
it must
they
be about the people specifically, right? The
But
two
they
individuals.
were, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons they were a
Yeah.
beloved specialty coffee roaster is because Lem and Kyle have great reputations in
Yeah.
the industry. They're both incredibly nice people. Every interaction I've had with them, both of them, has been really
Super good.
selfless. They're super nice. Like, I still remember meeting Lem in Long Beach, like 2006. Met
Yeah.
him in the parking lot, and we were
He was
both kind of
always
staying
cool.
at the same hotel, and we just kind of start up a conversation. I just remember, like, this guy's cool. Like,
Yeah.
I like this guy.
For sure.
I don't know why. I just like him. I
don't know why,
He
dude.
just made me feel
like
good.
you.
So it's like when people like that start an
Yeah.
organization, I think people are
That's
going to pay
why, for
attention,
sure. Mhm.
right? And then I've only had their coffee, a handful of times, so I got nothing to say on that end.
Both barista champions.
Both barista champions.
Probably helps a little bit.
I'm sure it does. I mean, and even like, here's the thing though, it's like, if you stripped away the championships, which I think obviously help, but they both have just like this huge, they both had a ton of industry respect and presence before they ever won the big one,
Yeah.
like Lem had been a staple for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And especially in the competition world. And Kyle kind of came for a different place. And when I met Kyle, I'm pretty sure he was working for Malkonig or GBS or whatever that was.
Yeah, he was a grinder guy.
At that era, and so they built this organization. They started a little bit after us, 2017, I think, from what I was reading. And then just were in the part of that specialty coffee, like high-end specialty coffee conversation,
Definitely.
Yeah, they were definitely a popular roaster. And then
Training a bunch of baristas as well for championships, and they got people into the finals multiple times.
yeah, lots of industry activation. You can just check them out on any of their channels. It's not hard to find out who they are and what they're about. And then a couple weeks ago, when was it? Last week, 2 weeks
I mean, by
ago,
the time this comes out, a month or so ago, maybe two.
there was some news that they had got acquired by Fairwave, which I wasn't really familiar with Fairwave, but so Fairwave is they're part of a bigger private equity company, right?
That's what it looks like.
Fairwave is part of Great Range Capital?
Yeah, you were telling me you looked it up, right?
They're a
That's
conglomerate.
where their financial backing comes from.
Yeah.
And they're essentially
Who owns Fairwave?
a company that's rolling up,
Multiple peeps.
a number of different coffee brands.
Great Range Capital. So yeah, Great Range Capital is a Kansas City-based private equity firm, and they have a bunch of different, you could call them, I guess, brands under their umbrella, and Fairwave is one of them. And Fairwave is just, like you said, they're exclusively focused on investing in or acquiring these high-end specialty coffee roasters.
Yeah, roasters. They've got maybe a couple bakery tea brands as well. But yeah, the vast majority of it are coffee brands.
Right. So if I'm looking at their brands here, there's some, like you mentioned, Jared, that have been around for a while. So the Roastery in Kansas City, Spy House, Anodyne, Messenger.
Yeah,
Up.
Anodyne.
Some of these I've heard of, some of them I haven't. Ceremony.
Ceremonies. Yep.
I've heard of Ceremony.
Had some ceremony times in Baltimore.
Yeah, there's a bakery, tea company, Black Dog. So
Woof woof.
And it's kind of like who's the company that's like rolled up like Pete's and Intelligentsia,
JAB Holding.
JAB. So it's kind of like a little JAB light version.
That's how I felt about it. I was like, oh, JAB for smaller.
Call that a private jab.
Yeah, it's just like a smaller
jab.
Public jab or private
You
jab?
into one of those private jabbies?
But they're kind of doing the same thing where you can acquire the brand, you can acquire the customers, and you can consolidate the back end. And from a business point of view, that's probably what makes it worthwhile for them. Like I know for JAB, they consolidate, right? You consolidate all the admin, right? So you reduce all the admin expenses and it makes the businesses more profitable. And then you have a number of these different brands, that are operating out there, like, either independently or semi-independently or not, maybe not independently at all.
Yeah, I don't know the nuts and bolts of it, but that totally makes sense, right? You could theoretically consolidate roasting,
and then like roasting, distribution channels, like with JAB, right? It's like Pete's and Intelligentsia and Stumptown. You see them all in the same
your grocery presence,
distribution,
and,
grocery presence, and if you're paying them, it all goes to the same back end. Like it's all the same accounting people, it's all the same HR people. So when you do these kinds of roll-ups, that's where the efficiencies and like the money saving comes from, is oftentimes on the back end.
Right. So if Black and White roasted the same amount of coffee, but they just had a higher organizational efficiency, that's where the ratchet is, right? It's
and then Fairwave, I'm sure, can negotiate better coffee. They're buying more coffee, right? So they can negotiate lower coffee prices because they've got a bigger buying heft in the market. Which for sure JAB leverages as well. So there's all these things that being part of a bigger organization, and again, capital. Like I feel like that's a big one to talk about. Is just like, and again, I don't know anything, but it's like a lot of smaller companies,
business,
including
right?
us, like we get to a point of like, cool, how are we going to fund future growth?
Right.
And Fairway seems to, they're
Pictures painted, it looks that way.
yeah, they've got the capital to afford these brands, potential capital for growth. So it's, again, that's one way to grow would be to sell your company to Fairwave, and they've got the capital to help you, build out new cafes and things like that. Whereas as an independent business, that can be challenging.
Yeah, absolutely.
sure.
And that's where, so I did something that I rarely do, which I don't recommend, which is going down a comments rabbit hole. It's a complete waste of time, waste of your life. But I was interested enough that when Sprudge posted something on their Instagram, it just kind of went bonkers, because you look at the engagement on the stuff that they're doing and it's pretty minimal overall. Like obviously Sprudge has a big platform, but the engagement is just kind of
per article,
right?
posting,
And then this one was just boom, like comments and shares were just out of control. So it's like, I know these guys. We'll just see what people are saying. And the interesting thing to me was that there was a ton. Well, it's kind of this split thing. On one end, so one of the things that came out with them getting acquired by Fairwave was that Lem was out. And I don't know anything about Lem being out. Like, I don't know anything about the situation.
Hello,
I haven't talked to
Cloud
either of these
crew,
people
Chris Garrett.
personally
Big hello from Australia.
recently,
My name
so
is
I don't
Reese.
know how that
I'm a long
is
time
going.
listener.
So there's a bunch of people showing support for Lem, and then there are a bunch of people just talking so much shit about how private equity ruins everything, how venture capital's stupid, how all these things are just like
I currently
dumb.
work
And
for
I
a coffee roaster.
thought it was
We also
really
have
interesting
cafes,
because
throughout
if you
Australia
wind it back,
as well.
it's like,
And my
if
question
you're upset,
today
I understand
is
why you're upset. If
a
you
lot of what you
were
talk about in terms of
affiliated
hospitality
with
and
or
service
a guest of, a patron of this brand that you saw as something that was special, unique, in some way small or intimate, and then it gets acquired by something bigger, I can understand the reaction of like, oh
Yeah,
man,
there's
that
always a backlash to that, right?
kind of goes
and
against
your
what I
online
thought I was
customers as well.
participating with.
Thank you so much. Keep doing what you're doing, and hope to
But
see
also,
you soon.
blame's kind of aimed in the wrong direction, if you want to call it blame. It's like private equity, they can't buy anything that's not for sale.
Exactly.
It's not the fault of private equity that your favorite coffee roaster got purchased. It's your favorite coffee
had to say
roaster
yes.
decided to sell their business. And I just thought that was really interesting. It's like, and again, I don't know the ins and outs. Like, obviously this works for them in some way, or some of them.
For who's left.
For who, you're right. So, but someone made the decision to say, like, cool, like, I want to entertain selling this thing. I want to entertain, like, offloading X amount of equity. So that's what I was trying to write about. It's like, dude, let's just have an honest conversation here.
Just
I
read
mean,
about,
just like
just
what
read
you
about
said,
somebody
like-
being super angry about anybody who buys lattes and be like, fuck latte drinkers. And it's like, well, we made the latte at the cafe. No, you can't buy a latte. No. And it's like, well, it's right there. I just bought it and I like it. And it's like, what?
Yeah,
If
and-
we offer a latte, you can't be mad that we, don't
But
be mad at the latte
100%
drinker.
it goes back to like
Only single origin.
like it has to be for sale to be bought.
Right. It has to
And-
be for sale to be bought.
And again, I think
It also has to be worth the person buying it to buy. So that says
Yeah.
some positive things about what's going on in that business in some regard.
100%. I mean, to build something that's really not that old to be acquired, and we don't know what the details are, but I don't know how much money they got for it. But the fact that someone wanted to purchase it is pretty awesome. And if you look at the other brands that Fairwave has purchased, I think they're all much older.
yeah,
They've been
definitely.
around
For sure.
for quite a bit longer versus the 7 or 8 years that Black and White has been
Definitely.
in business. And then I said the same thing when Nestle bought Blue Bottle. That is, you can feel however you want to feel about Nestle or the acquisition again of your favorite coffee company, but all these things seem good in that it's kind of proof positive there is a market for small independent specialty coffee brands. Like, the industry is growing enough to where there is room. That's what I saw when Blue Bottle was bought. It's like, oh, one of the most gigantic companies out there wants to purchase essentially, a boutique coffee brand. This means there is something happening in specialty coffee.
Yeah, there's value here.
Yeah.
right. There's value
Which
in
we've been
that
pushing on since like late 90s.
in that space.
Right.
Right. So the space is getting somewhere where it's starting to, I don't know, mature in some way. And it's interesting enough for big money people to stake some investment in it. And I just,
Yeah, and that's where it's just, for the other thing that you just never know from the outside looking in is like how companies' ownership is structured.
Yep.
Right? You never know from the outside looking in who owns what or who doesn't own what. We've known situations where people have been, where people are the face of the company, but they actually owned very little, like
or nothing.
5 or 10% or
Right.
nothing. And so it's like they ultimately, while being the face, it's like they ultimately had no real
Stake, if you will.
power to make, to make that decision like that. And they were kind of subject to other people making the decisions, which can suck for them, right? It's like that can suck, like to not be, to not have truly that ownership over what you're deciding to do
Absolutely.
and the choices that you're deciding to make. So I think that is also something to note in situations like this is like, from the outside looking in, you don't know who owned what or who didn't own what and who
who
brought,
ultimately made that decision
Yeah.
to say, hey, we're going to sell.
a lot of times you don't see maybe the private equity coming in or venture cap coming in. Just look at who are like the brothers in the San Francisco company. They got
Sightglass
ousted.
Squad.
Oh, yeah, the Sightglass, yeah.
Sightglass, like
Squad.
the brothers that founded Sightglass. They don't run things anymore. And that's a product of like bringing venture cap or private equity in, and and investors that you bring in accumulating a big enough stake that they have the say and not you anymore.
Right. Or even just from the jump, there might be someone else that we don't know about that's there who's making decisions who is neither Kyle nor Lem.
Right.
Right? It's like, this isn't the case here, but we could be the faces of the company
Yeah.
and have an equity partner who helped us start it who actually owns, 51%, and then we're
Beholden.
along for the
Right.
ride, right?
Thankfully, we have control of our company. But again, but to that point, it's like, but then
And-
we do have control, but it's
Right.
like we talk every week about how we're going to grow and how we're going to fund that growth, right? And that's a function of us owning it and having control, but not having these bigger capital partners
Right.
that other people
Right.
may have.
So that's the other thing I wanted to explore, that for people's gut reaction of, man, you guys sold out, whatever. It's the day-to-day experience of running a company can be really interesting. And I don't know what their experience was like, but it's certainly not easy. Especially if you're at a certain size or how
Guaranteed.
how well you're managing the business. They could, and I'm not saying any of these things are true, these are just possible. They could have been having a really hard financial time, and their day-to-day life could have been terrible. It's like, cool, we have this brand that's got notoriety, but we're actually not making a ton of money, and this is a pain in the ass, and I want to get out of this. Or, hey, I've spent a lot of time, effort, and energy building this thing, and I really care about it, but I just want a little bit more freedom or funds to grow it in a way that makes sense to me. I've got other goals in my life right now, like my family's more important than my work, and yada yada. There's like a million different reasons, none of which are bad, none of which make me think, oh, dude, those guys sold out, that you would want to take on investment to try to grow this company or rearrange how you interact with it. So, it's annoying to be that guy, but it's like, if you haven't experienced it, it's really hard to.
Well, I mean, picture it. Anybody who thinks they're going to come up, there's young people out there who are like, I'm going to come up and I'm going to start a company. And you're thinking this based on your ability to understand what you see and have done and experienced. And there's a lot of stuff you haven't, which as 3 owners, there's a lot of things we hadn't gone through. So you get to these places and you're like, great, I do know how to make it feel a way and train people potentially. And I get to this level, but then there's a reality that comes into play, which is, you physically, if you want to provide and you want to have a company that runs, you cannot be making coffee every single day. And that's ultimately a lot of the reason people fall in love with this, is to make the product and serve the product and create these experiences. And then you get to the place where you need to be large enough, you need to be engaged enough, and you need to create something special enough that it runs without you. But who's teaching you that? And that's the whole point. So then you potentially have to spend a shit ton of time in your head together as a leadership group of whatever that group is. It could just be, let's just pretend that it was only Kyle and them. And neither of them, based on the history that we potentially know, had run a multi-unit company with a roastery and potentially a shit ton of extra, like accounting and CPA, taxes. Like there's this whole back end world that a lot of people out there who are, talking whatever shit they're talking about, any portion of owners and leaders, that has to get done in such a way that the business will run successfully and bring in more money than it puts out. And so it can be extremely tiring and draining if you're trying to be a company that cares about people, cares about quality, cares about experience, and wants to survive. You're spending a lot of time in conversation about what can we do, what might work. And if you don't have anybody else in your ear who has had that experience before, it's that same thing. It's like every time, go back to Mario. Every time you beat level 1 in Mario, it took a little bit of time, then you beat level 1, and it takes you like 2 seconds to beat level 1 now. And then level 2 is exponentially harder, and it takes you however long it takes to do that again, and so on and so forth. And it's like, that's what this is. You're getting to whatever level we'll call that in the world, and it takes a long ass time to master it. And if you don't spend the time doing it, instead of spending the time making the coffee and essentially like kissing all of your barista asses, for lack of a better term. I'm being kind of a hater, but it's like, unless I'm serious, like all these people are hating because they want to see everybody out there because we've done a great job, and I'm down with that. But if you are not spending the time developing yourself and your understanding of your business, instead of essentially, high-fiving everybody and making them feel good, you are potentially getting behind slowly but surely, not learning how to get past level 5, which is build a sustainable business. And once you've learned to do that, then you can probably do it again faster afterwards. But that takes a really long time.
It does,
and
and,
it's endless.
and then again, it's always changing.
And that's
right.
Then
I mean,
we
that's
have tariffs,
like
and it's
every new level
totally.
is a different challenge,
Exactly.
and so that's
So I have a lot of empathy for people.
yeah. That's again what is a big part of it, is that you're not playing the same game
Right.
over and over and again. You're playing a game that's constantly evolving, and you have to constantly be problem solving in the best way possible for your team members, your guests,
Right.
Other your peers, other people you work with. That's the real challenge of running the business, is that the business is always evolving and changing.
So then that's where it's like fair Lane, not Lane. Lane?
Wave.
Wave. Fairlane's the milk, the yummy drink, the drink I get at Costco. Fair Wave.
Fairlane
Great.
milk.
Yeah, there's a plug for you. It's chocolate milk, but it's got 30 grams of protein. Holla.
A free ad for you.
That's where you potentially insert why this could be beneficial for somebody. If you are truly at an impasse as to, which again, I'm inserting a projected idea that is potentially not true, but whoever's in that ownership group is at an impasse and they don't know how to do this anymore at a level and they're stressed out and they're at the end of their ropes. Somebody like this can come in and be like, yo, we got a shit ton of experience in here, and here. We can take all that off the plate and we can make sure that you can focus on the things, again, that maybe you love and are good at.
Right.
And then you can get to business doing what you do, which they say on their website. That's kind of the goal. Whether it ends up being true or not, I was like here and door there. But you can see why it would make sense.
But the other flip side of that is you no longer control your company.
And that's
and
totally the other part of that.
You now have a job where you work for someone else.
Correct.
Who can fire you.
Totally.
And so that's
potentially depending on whatever the contract is. We assume that's what it would be, though.
In pretty
for them
much
to buy a company.
99% of cases, when you are selling your company, you no longer own enough equity in the company to
say no.
Yes, to keep yourself there if other people
Don't
decide
want you
it's
there
time
anymore.
for you to move on.
Totally. No, yeah.
Right,
So I'm not trying to
so
say it's good or bad. I'm saying understanding as to why you could get there.
There's just different, totally,
Right.
and just that there's different sides to it.
Right.
Once you get there.
Totally.
Yeah. That's exactly how I see it, where it's just
Not easy, y'all.
right. I'm hesitant to judge people for selling or not selling or this or that. It's just like, we don't know these people's specific challenges.
Yeah.
We don't know the reasons behind it. They haven't been super loud about it, and that's their decision. That's fine too. So just to come with I don't know. It just seems like if you really liked a thing and then this thing happened, it feels more productive to be supportive than not. At least that's how I'm seeing it, where it's, wow, you guys created something that is worth being bought.
That's pretty awesome.
That's pretty awesome, because most of us will never do that.
Yeah.
Right?
Was it
that's
like
still rare.
90-something% of all businesses created fail within the first couple
5
of years?
years, yeah.
Right. To create something that contributes to the culture in a meaningful way, which they have, and to create something that is valuable enough that someone from the outside says, hey, I want a piece of this. That's cool. Like, whether you like it or not, that's fine. Like, you can choose to not like it. Again, I'm agnostic on this one. It's not keeping me up at night either way, but I just did think it was interesting when I just ran down those comment threads. I'm like, geez, people are pissed. But and we had talked about this last week, probably a small percentage of people who feel like that, and not enough of a percentage to really impact the day-to-day functioning of the business.
Oh yeah, the business will be fine.
Yeah, it's like this small, super loud vocal minority that's probably really angry about this, and most people are probably completely unaware that this thing even happened.
Most of their guests.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Most of their guests are not in the specialty coffee industry, right? They're just everyday people who vibe with and enjoy the experience they're getting at Black and White, and that's why they go every day.
Everyday people. That's all I can think about. For sure, dude.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fun world out there, guys. Everybody already knows the truth, so it's fine. You don't even have to help. Just they'll tell you on the internet.
The internet holds the truth.
Every time. Apparently.
That's perfect. Cool. Yeah.
Okay,
I'd been thinking about it a lot. So thanks for chatting with me about that.
It's always interesting when there's kind of like a transaction like that in the industry.
Yeah. I just wanted to kick it around and also provide a view from potentially the other side, how we might have to have some empathy for whatever's going on. I don't know.
I mean, to that same point though, it's like Sight Glasses has or was super famous, and it's like, did they sell? You know what I'm saying? Or did they just take on private equity? These are just questions, right? Is like, is there a difference between quote unquote selling and taking on private equity? Or did we just hear about it because this company is so large and are outwardly trying to buy specialty cafe companies? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you generally won't hear about
Right. Like,
private
maybe a lot of people
investments
have
that happen
stuff like this happening.
throughout the course of a business.
Yeah, that just came
Like
into
there's
my mind.
more examples of this than
Probably.
we know of, because
There has to be.
Yeah,
There
I don't
has
know.
to be. How
Well,
many baristas? Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm just guessing. Maybe
yeah,
not
likely
on this
more
scale.
examples of like companies being funded where maybe the face of the companies don't own a majority, right? I mean, that could be possible where, you know, you're raising some kind of equity in the beginning, you know, to start the company.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't really, you don't hear about that. Those are all private transactions. But usually if there's, you know, like an acquisition is you're generally going to hear about it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And Sightglass was what? It was a death by
They-
1,000 cuts kind
They
of
had,
thing?
they had
Probably.
private equity. Yeah, they had big tech investors in the beginning and along the way.
Shout out to BTI, dude.
BTI. But they had didn't they kind of slowly roll off what they owned? Or I don't know.
I don't know.
pretend to know.
I can't
I
pretend to know how
yeah,
any of
I
it
can't
works.
speak to
The more of the article just
to
was
more
like,
of it other than
they don't work
knowing
here no
that
more.
they, yeah, it was pretty like public that they had like Jack Dorsey and some of the
Yeah, Square
companies
did.
that he owned were early investors in Sightglass.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's also it's just I think it's,
Right, because the brothers are out and they hired someone from Starbucks who used to run a big part of Starbucks like wholesale division. I think is now the CEO of Sightglass.
Yeah. It's really interesting to compare the cultural landscape to what the business landscape might look like. So if you took a company like Intelligentsia or Stumptown, who in my mind they're essentially dead brands,
Yeah.
meaning they have very little cultural impact in what we're doing. But if you looked at what they're selling with RTD and wholesale coffee, it might be a whole hell of a lot.
Oh, yeah,
Right?
sure.
So it's like from a business perspective,
Well, because they're leveraging the much larger resources of JAB's distribution, right? So you can see their coffee nationwide everywhere that Pete's, because essentially, right, Pete's owns both of them, JAB owns Pete's.
right.
So they're everywhere that Pete's is.
Mm-hmm.
and
right.
locally they're still killing it in
Right.
Seattle and Portland. Like
Right,
I'll
that's
go
the
and
thing.
check one of their cafes, and they're still just as busy, if not more, than they were when we were coming up. Anyway,
Right. Yeah. So that's the interesting part where you can have a brand that's got low cultural cachet in a certain sphere, but still delights their guests every
a good
day,
time,
and
honestly.
everybody has a
Yeah.
great time. And it's just really interesting. You know, I think
just different
in
levels.
fact, like I wouldn't necessarily, if I went like the Stumptown, two men experiences I remember, one was in Seattle and one was in Portland. Aside from me knowing what I know, you wouldn't go in there and have any inkling of feeling like they're not, too
Right.
different or
Than what they
dissimilar than what
were.
they were when we went in.
Yeah.
If in fact, technically because of everything we have now, a little more technically advanced, otherwise not much difference at all. Like still cool branded little horseshoe cups, still hairbender tasty coffee. It's like not bad. Still a single origin offering, like nothing weird at all.
Yeah.
And they don't feel so. I mean, whether that's good or bad, it is. They're busy
Right.
cafes that feel like the Stumptown I went into.
that's why I think that's cool.
And I'd consider that a win, honestly, if
It's
I was
Total
Dwayne.
win. Oh, it's a total
You
win.
know?
I mean, it's easy to get sucked into the vortex, which I did. Like I got sucked into the specialty coffee vortex. What's going on with black and white? Because it popped. But I don't think about that on the day to day. I thought it was interesting from a cultural perspective. But at the end of the day, it's whose approval are we really vying for here? Who are we trying to be cool in front of? Is it a bunch of people who make up this industry who have no impact on our business, or is it the guests that come into our cafe every day? Is it our employees? Like what game are we trying to play? And there's a lot of different games available.
Yeah,
and you can
definitely.
you can choose the game you want to play.
Yeah, choose what your priorities are.
And you might not be winning all the games all the time, and that's fine.
That's okay.
That's totally fine. Yeah. Happy Monday, everybody.
Yeah.
out.
Happy coffee time.
Hey everyone, that's the podcast for the week. Thanks so much for listening. If you heard something that inspired you, or if you heard something that gave you more questions than answers, send us an email to podcast@catandcloud.com. And if you're looking to know more about us, then head to our website at catandcloud.com, where you can find everything we have to offer. A great place to start would be The Answer, our house coffee that's right for any occasion. Or the Best Friends Blend, a coffee that tastes just as good as the good it does by donating $1 per pound back to our partnering producers. Also, if you're feeling extra friendly, connect with us in the usual places like YouTube, Instagram, pretty much everywhere that's hip. All right, that's it. Thanks for being awesome, everyone, and we'll be back next week.